Hi, you've reached Michael Thompson. Leave a message and I'll get back to you. That same recording. That same cheerful voice that used to call me every Sunday without fail. Before everything changed, I pressed Jennifer's number. Straight to voicemail again. Hi there. Can't come to the phone right now, but your call is super important to us. Super important. The laugh that tried to escape came out like a sob instead. Around me, the last stragglers wheeled their suitcases toward those doors, toward people who cared enough to be there. I pulled my cardigan tighter and tried Tyler's number, my 16-year-old grandson who used to beg for my chocolate chip cookies every visit. Grandma? His voice sounded flat, distracted. Oh, hey, Mom and Dad are at some dinner thing. Can you just take an Uber or something? I've got homework. Click. The line went dead. The baggage carousel had stopped spinning. My black suitcase sat alone, circling like a lost animal. I walked over and grabbed the handle, feeling the weight pull at my fresh surgical scar. 3 days since they'd removed my gallbladder. 3 days since I'd almost died on that operating table. Ma'am, you need someone to call for you. A security guard appeared beside me, kind eyes and a weathered face. You look like you could use some help. I shook my head, not trusting my voice. If I spoke, I might fall apart completely. Outside, I climbed into a taxi. The driver kept glancing at me in his rearview mirror like I was something broken he'd found on the side of the road. I gave him my address and stared out the window at the city lights blurring past. At home, I sat in my empty driveway, staring at the dark windows of the house James and I had shared for 37 years. 43 years of raising Michael. Birthday parties, Christmas mornings, bedtime stories read in voices I'd perfected just to see him smile. This was what it amounted to. A 78-year-old woman recovering from surgery, abandoned at an airport like forgotten luggage. I fumbled for my house keys, my hands still trembling from exhaustion, and something else I couldn't name yet. The porch light cast everything in harsh shadows. That's when I saw it. My front door stood slightly ajar, but I remembered locking it. I always locked it. James had drilled that into me after 37 years of marriage. Lock the door, Nancy. You never know who might be watching. I pushed the door open with one finger. The hinges creaked like old bones. I pushed the door open wider and stepped inside. The floorboards groaned under my feet like old bones protesting. Every step sent a sharp reminder through my surgical scar, the pain radiating from my abdomen up into my ribs. The house felt wrong, not burglarized, violated, as if invisible hands had touched everything I held sacred while I'd been fighting for my life on an operating table 300 miles away. James's reading chair had been moved. I stopped dead in the hallway, staring at it. 6 inches. Someone had pushed his leather recliner 6 inches closer to the window. I'd positioned that chair perfectly 43 years ago to catch the morning light where he used to read his newspaper. Every fold in the leather, every scuff mark on the wooden legs, I knew them all by heart. Someone had sat in my dead husband's chair. Someone had adjusted it like they owned the place. My breath came in short gasps as I walked to the mantelpiece. The family photos stood in their usual places, but dust outlined perfect clean rectangles on the wooden surface. Someone had lifted them, examined them. My wedding photo with James, his young face grinning beside mine in that rented tuxedo he'd been so proud of. Tyler's baby pictures, his toothless smile captured in faded Polaroids. Michael's high school graduation, that cocky smirk I'd thought was charming back then. All of them had been picked up, studied, evaluated, and carefully replaced. I climbed the stairs, each step a small agony, and found my bedroom door standing open. The jewelry box on my dresser sat askew, its small brass lock scratched with fresh gouges. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid. Gone. My mother's pearl necklace was gone, the one I'd worn to my own wedding. The one Jennifer had admired every Christmas dinner for 10 years, holding it up to her throat in my bedroom mirror while I watched from the doorway. "It's so beautiful, Mom Thompson," she'd say, her fingers caressing the lustrous beads. "So elegant. I hope someday I'll have something this special." I'd always planned to leave it to her. The absence hit me like a physical blow. I sank onto my bed, still wearing the clothes I'd traveled in, and wept until my incision ached with each sob. This wasn't grief anymore. This was something darker, something that tasted like copper pennies and betrayal. Someone had been in my sanctuary while I lay unconscious, machines beeping around me, nurses checking my vital signs every hour. Someone had walked through my home, touching my memories, stealing my treasures. The violation felt intimate, personal, like being robbed by ghosts who knew exactly what would hurt the most. I forced myself to stand and walk to the kitchen, my legs unsteady. The familiar space should have comforted me, but even here, things felt displaced. Wrong angles, subtle shifts that only someone who'd lived in the same house for decades would notice. I opened the trash can and found fresh coffee grounds. My heart stopped. I'd been gone 4 days. 4 days of surgery, recovery, and the long flight home. I couldn't drink coffee. The post-operative medications made my stomach too sensitive, but these grounds were dark, still fragrant, recent. Someone had been here. Recently. The refrigerator hummed in the corner, that familiar sound that had lulled me to sleep countless nights. I pulled the door open and stared at the half-empty shelves, the container of homemade chicken soup I'd prepared before surgery gone. I'd frozen it specifically for my recovery, knowing I'd be too weak to cook. The expensive aged cheddar I'd been saving for Christmas morning, missing. 2 bottles were gone from my anniversary collection. James and I had bought that 1985 Cabernet for our 25th wedding anniversary, planning to open it on some special occasion that never seemed special enough. We died before we could drink it, and now someone had helped themselves to our memories while I recovered alone in a sterile hospital bed. My hands shook as I gripped the refrigerator handle. The cold metal bit into my palms. I looked out the kitchen window toward Dorothy's house next door. She'd promised to check on things while I was away, water my plants, collect my mail. Had she seen someone coming and going? Had she been part of this somehow? The thought made my stomach turn. Dorothy had been my neighbor for 15 years. We'd borrowed sugar and exchanged Christmas cookies. We'd sat on each other's porches during James's final illness, sharing tissues and terrible coffee while we watched him fade away. I needed to know. I walked to the back door and checked the spare key hiding spot, the fake rock beside my garden gnome that James had always said was too obvious. I lifted it with shaking fingers. Empty. The spare key was gone. Someone had taken it. Someone who knew exactly where I hid it. Someone who'd been to my house many times before, who'd watched me fumble with my real keys and seen me replace the fake rock in exactly the same spot every time. Someone I trusted. I began searching systematically through each room, taking inventory of what else might be missing. My address book from the kitchen drawer, gone. All those phone numbers I'd collected over 78 years of life. Friends from teaching, bridge club members, church committees, wiped away like I'd never existed. The small emergency cash envelope I kept in my desk, empty. $200 I'd saved for household emergencies, tucked between old tax returns where I thought it would be safe. But it was in the living room where I found the thing that made my blood freeze in my veins. Plugged into the wall outlet behind the kitchen table, almost hidden by the tablecloth, was Michael's iPhone charger. I knew it immediately. That distinctive white cable with the frayed corner where our old dog Buster had chewed it years ago, back when Michael was still in college and came home every weekend with laundry and an appetite. I'd scolded him about letting the dog near his electronics, but he just laughed and said Buster was getting too old to care about cables. Michael had claimed to forget this exact charger during his last visit 2 months ago. He'd called me 3 days later, asking if I'd seen it. "I think I left it behind accidentally," he'd said. "Could you mail it to me, Mom? I'll pay you back for shipping." I'd driven to Best Buy that same afternoon and bought him a replacement. Spent $40 on overnight shipping because he'd said he needed it for work. Watched the postal worker scan the package and promise it would arrive by 10 the next morning. So why was his old charger here, plugged into my wall like someone had been using it regularly? I unplugged it with trembling fingers. The cable was still warm. Still warm. That meant someone had been using it recently. Very recently. Within the last few hours, maybe while I was sitting in that airport calling number after number, begging my family to care enough to pick me up. I held the charger in my hands, feeling its weight like a stone settling in my chest. If Michael had been here recently enough to need a phone charger, why hadn't he visited me in the hospital? Why hadn't he answered his phone when I called from the airport? Why hadn't he picked up his recovering mother instead of telling her to take an Uber? Why had he lied about being too busy to help? The questions multiplied in my mind like cancer cells, each one spawning 3 more. I sank into one of my kitchen chairs, the same chairs where Michael had eaten countless bowls of cereal before school, where Tyler had colored pictures of dinosaurs and spaceships, where James and I had shared 43 years of morning coffee and evening conversations. The charger grew heavy in my hands. Such a small thing, just plastic and wire and copper, but it changed everything. If Michael had been secretly visiting my house, what else had he taken? What else had he done while I was unconscious and helpless? And most importantly, why did he need to hide these visits from his own mother? I set the charger on the table and stared at it. The frayed corner seemed to mock me, a small imperfection that proved beyond doubt that my son had been lying to me. The same son who couldn't be bothered to pick me up from the airport. The same son who'd claimed to be too busy with Tyler's soccer tournament to help his recovering mother. But he'd had time to come to my house. He'd had time to go through my things, to eat my food, to charge his phone, while he did whatever he'd been doing here. The warm cable told me everything I needed to know and nothing I wanted to believe. 3 weeks passed like a slow bleed. I sat at my kitchen table, the same spot where I'd found Michael's warm phone charger, staring at a stack of unopened bank statements. My surgical bandages had finally come off that morning, leaving angry red lines across my abdomen. The physical wounds were healing. The other wounds felt deeper every day. I'd avoided these envelopes, afraid of what bills might have piled up during my surgery. Medical statements, insurance forms, the bureaucratic aftermath of nearly dying. But loneliness and suspicion had become my only companions. I needed to know. The pain medication made everything fuzzy around the edges, but when I tore open that first envelope, the numbers came into sharp, terrible focus. July statement. $15,000 withdrawn from my savings account. I stared at the date. July 15th. I remembered that day perfectly. I'd been in bed for 3 days with chest pains, too weak to even make tea. The doctor had called it a minor cardiac episode and prescribed rest. I'd barely been able to get to the bathroom, let alone the bank. But someone had. August statement. Another $8,500 gone. The date made my stomach turn. August 23rd, my birthday. The day Michael had called to say he was too busy with work to visit, too busy to see his mother turn 78, but apparently not too busy to visit my bank account. I spread the statements across the table like tarot cards predicting disaster. September, October, November, every month like clockwork. Always during my medical appointments. Always when I was vulnerable. Always when I was alone. Each withdrawal was exactly $9,500, just under the $10,000 threshold that would trigger automatic bank reporting. Someone knew the regulations. I traced the numbers with my finger, feeling my world tilt sideways. This wasn't random theft. This was systematic, calculated, professional, and it had been going on for months while I'd worried about being a burden to my family. My family. My heart clenched around that word like a fist. I pulled out my magnifying glass. 40 years of grading papers had made it a habit and examined each statement more carefully. The withdrawals weren't the only problem. Checks I'd never written dotted the pages like ugly bruises. Check number 2847. Phoenix Estate Planning Services. $3,200. I'd never heard of them. Check number 2851. Caldwell Legal Associates. $5,000. Never heard of them either. Check number 2854. Peterson Medical Consulting. $2,800. The signatures look like mine. Almost. I pulled out some Christmas cards I'd saved from last year and compared the handwriting. The forgeries were sophisticated, nearly perfect. But they were missing something. That slight tremor I'd developed after James died 3 years ago. The way grief had changed even the way I held a pen. These signatures were too steady, too confident, younger. Someone had been practicing my signature, but they'd practiced the wrong version. They'd copied my handwriting from years ago, before loss had made my hands shake, before sorrow had curved my shoulders and weakened my grip. The realization hit me like cold water. Whoever was stealing from me had access to old documents, marriage certificates, insurance papers, tax returns, documents that only someone very close to me would have. Someone who'd been in my house for years, someone I'd trusted with my most private papers, someone like family. My hands shook as I reached for the phone. Wells Fargo customer service answered on the third ring. "This is Nancy Thompson," I said. "I need to report some forged checks." "Of course, Mrs. Thompson. Let me pull up your account." The hold music played something cheerful and meaningless while I stared at the evidence spread across my table. When the representative came back on the line, her voice sounded different, careful. "Mrs. Thompson? This is Sarah Campbell. I see here that you have several accounts with us. Are you calling about your personal checking, your savings, or the joint account with Michael Thompson?" The words hit me like a physical blow. Joint account? Silence on the other end. Then Sarah's voice, more careful now. "Ma'am, I show a joint checking account opened in September under your Social Security number with Michael Thompson as co-owner. Are you calling about that account as well?" My heart stopped beating, or maybe it just felt that way. "I never opened a joint account with Michael." More silence. I could hear Sarah typing, probably checking and double-checking her screen. "Mrs. Thompson, are you still there?" My voice came out as a whisper. "Could you read me the account details?" Sarah hesitated. The account was opened September 15th with an initial deposit of $45,000 transferred from your savings account. The signature card shows your authorization for family financial assistance due to increasing confusion and medical needs. September 15th. The day I'd been in the emergency room with chest pains, terrified I was having a heart attack. While I'd been alone and scared in a hospital bed, someone had been at the bank, forging my signature, stealing my money, using my son's name to do it. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm required to ask, are you experiencing any cognitive difficulties, memory problems? The documentation here suggests you requested this account specifically to help your family manage your finances as your condition, as your needs changed." I never said those words, never spoken to anyone about confusion or medical needs, never authorized anyone to manage my finances. I'd been sharp as a tack my whole life, sharp enough to teach high school English for 35 years, sharp enough to balance my own checkbook down to the penny, but someone had convinced a bank that I was losing my mind. "Mrs. Thompson?" The account shows significant recent activity, large deposits and withdrawals. I'm not able to discuss the details over the phone, but you're welcome to come in tomorrow morning and we can review everything together. I hung up without saying goodbye. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence. The same clock that had counted down 43 years of family dinners, homework help, and bedtime stories. The same clock that had marked time while someone systematically stole my life's work. Large deposits and withdrawals, Sarah had said. Recent activity. What had they been doing with my money? Where had it gone? And how long had they been planning this? I looked at the bank statements scattered across my table and realized they were just the beginning. The warm phone charger suddenly made perfect sense. Michael had been here, all right. He'd been here planning my financial funeral while I'd been dying in a hospital bed 300 miles away. I walked into Wells Fargo the next morning with my purse clutched tight against my chest, surgical scars still pulling with each step. Now they carried me toward the truth I wasn't sure I wanted to hear. David Mill was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of eyes that had probably delivered bad news before. But when he spread my account records across his mahogany desk, even his professional composure cracked. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, his voice carefully controlled, "I've been reviewing your accounts all morning." The papers covered his desk like fallen leaves, bank statements, transfer authorizations, legal documents I'd never seen before. David's hands trembled slightly as he arranged them in chronological order. The joint account shows $127,000 in total transfers from your various accounts over 6 months. My breath caught. $127,000, more than I'd saved in the last 5 years combined. Each transfer was carefully documented, David continued, lifting a stack of official-looking papers, supported by what appears to be legitimate legal authorization. He slid a document across the desk, power of attorney papers with my name typed at the top, my signature at the bottom, notarized, witnessed, completely legal, completely fake. "Mrs. Thompson, this document appears to give your son legal authority over your finances. His signature is on file for all transactions." I stared at the signature line, my name written in handwriting that looked almost right but felt absolutely wrong. The date made my stomach turn. March 15th, the exact day I'd been in the emergency room with chest pains, terrified and alone. While I'd been fighting for my life, someone had been in this very bank, forging my name, stealing my future. "Mr. Miller," I said quietly, "I've never seen this document before in my life." His face went pale. He removed his glasses and cleaned them with shaking hands. "Mrs. Thompson, in my 15 years as a bank manager, I've never encountered fraud this sophisticated." Sophisticated. David's hands shook more as he pulled out another folder. "There are medical records here as well. Documentation that was provided to support the financial arrangements." He opened the folder and began reading aloud, his voice growing quieter with each word. "Dr. Peterson's neurological evaluation shows moderate dementia and increasing confusion. Patient demonstrates significant memory loss and disorientation regarding daily activities." I'd never met Dr. Peterson. Dr. Sandra Williams confirms patient is easily disoriented and requires family supervision for financial decisions due to progressing cognitive decline. I'd never heard of Dr. Williams. Dr. Rebecca Thompson, licensed social worker, recommends immediate family oversight of patient's affairs due to cognitive decline and safety. Concerns observed during home visits. Rebecca Thompson, Jennifer's sister. The room tilted sideways. I gripped the arms of my chair until my knuckles went white. Rebecca, who had visited last Christmas with her warm smile and concerned questions. "How are you managing, Nancy? Are you remembering to take your medications? Sometimes grief can affect our memory, you know." Each fake medical report painted the same picture. A confused old woman who forgot conversations, mixed up medications, showed signs of paranoia about her family's helpful involvement. Each fabricated symptom justified another level of control over my money, my decisions, my life. "Rebecca filed her report on December 28th, David said, checking the date, 3 days after Christmas. I remembered that Christmas dinner with perfect clarity. I'd cooked for 12 hours straight, prime rib with Yorkshire pudding, my grandmother's stuffing recipe, 7 different side dishes. I'd hosted 8 family members and never missed a beat. But Rebecca's official report described a confused old woman who burned the turkey and forgot guests' names. That hadn't been a family dinner. It had been an evaluation. A professional assessment disguised as holiday celebration. Rebecca had sat at my table, eating my food, watching me serve and clean and manage everything, while mentally writing a report that would help steal my life. Mrs. Thompson? David's voice sounded far away. Are you all right? I wasn't all right. I might never be all right again. David reached for the bottom of my file and pulled out a yellow, sticky note with business cards paper-clipped beneath it. Thompson case contacts, he read from the note. He spread the cards across his desk like evidence at a crime scene. Dr. Peterson, neurologist. Dr. Sandra Williams, geriatrician. Robert Caldwell, estate attorney. Rebecca Thompson, licensed social worker. Jennifer Thompson listed as primary family caregiver. They'd built an entire network, professionals with degrees and licenses and official letterhead. Some probably legitimate but deceived, others clearly complicit, all working together to prove I was too confused to manage my own life. It appears they've been building a comprehensive case, David said, his voice barely above a whisper. Medical documentation, legal authorization, professional recommendations, everything needed to assume complete control of your affairs. Complete control. The words echoed in my head like a death sentence. I thought about Rebecca's questions over Christmas dinner. How was my memory? Did I ever feel confused about dates? Had I been forgetting to pay bills? All delivered with such caring concern while Tyler played video games in the corner and Michael carved the roast I'd cooked perfectly. They'd all been watching me, evaluating me, building their case while I worried about making sure everyone had enough to eat. David's voice grew even quieter. Mrs. Thompson, there's one more document here. He reached the very bottom of the file and pulled out a single sheet of paper. His hands were shaking openly now. This changes everything. I leaned forward, dreading what came next. It's a death certificate application, filed but not yet processed. The words hit me like ice water. Death certificate, my death certificate, filed while I was still breathing, still fighting, still believing my family loved me. They were planning to kill me, I whispered. David's face had gone completely white. Mrs. Thompson, I think we need to call the police. But I was already thinking ahead, my teacher's mind clicking into analytical mode despite the horror washing over me. If they'd gone this far, if they'd built this elaborate network of lies and forgeries and false documents, they weren't going to stop just because I discovered their plan. They were going to accelerate it. David Miller's hands trembled as he slid the final document across his mahogany desk. The paper whispered against the wood like a dying breath. I looked down and saw my own name typed in a box labeled deceased. Preliminary death certificate application, filed by Michael Thompson, next of kin. Cause of death. Expected natural death due to complications from surgery and underlying dementia. My son had murdered me on paper. I stared at the document until the words blurred. Date of death listed as pending, as if my life was just a calendar appointment waiting to be crossed off. The medical justification section referenced every fake doctor's report David had shown me. Dr. Peterson's false dementia diagnosis, Dr. Williams's fabricated confusion claims, Rebecca's lying social work evaluation. They'd built a case for why my death would be natural, expected, legally sound. The document is dated 1 week before your surgery, David whispered. It's like he was waiting for the perfect opportunity. I traced the date with my finger. March 8th. 7 days before I'd gone under anesthesia, trusting that my family would be there when I woke up. Instead, Michael had been planning my funeral while I'd been picking out a comfortable nightgown for the hospital. Something cold and hard settled in my chest where my heart used to be. This wasn't greed anymore. This wasn't even fraud. This was premeditated murder, disguised as legal paperwork. Mrs. Thompson? David's voice sounded far away. Do you need some water? You look pale. I shook my head. Water wouldn't help. Nothing would help. I was staring at evidence that my own son had planned to kill me for money. When I left the bank, my hands moved without conscious thought. I found myself dialing my insurance company from my car in the parking lot. Mutual Benefit Life. The number I'd memorized 40 years ago when James and I had first taken out the policy. The customer service representative answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Thompson, your son called yesterday to begin the claims process." My voice stuck in my throat. "I'm sorry?" "He said you passed peacefully at home after surgery complications. We'll have your claim processed within 2 weeks." The world tilted sideways. Someone thought I was dead. Someone at my insurance company had official documentation proving I was dead. "This is Nancy Thompson," I managed. "I'm not dead." Silence stretched between us like a chasm. "Ma'am, I'm not sure I understand." Mr. Michael Thompson filed a death claim yesterday with all the proper documentation. Medical records, preliminary death certificate, witness statements from family members about your final days. $400,000. My life insurance policy. Money I'd planned to leave to Tyler for college. Money Michael had already claimed. He provided detailed medical records showing your mental decline, the representative continued, and witness statements from your daughter-in-law and grandson about your peaceful passing at home. Jennifer and Tyler had signed statements about my death. They'd described my final moments while I was sitting in a hospital bed 300 miles away. "Ma'am, if this is some kind of fraud attempt, I need to report this call. Identity theft involving deceased persons is a federal crime." I was now in the surreal position of having to prove I was alive to people who had official documentation of my death. I hung up and sat in my car, watching normal people walk in and out of the bank. People with families who loved them. People whose children didn't file death certificates while they recovered from surgery. My fingers dialed another number before my brain could stop them. Sunset Memorial Gardens, the funeral home listed on my fake death certificate. "Sunset Memorial, how may I help you during this difficult time?" "This is regarding Nancy Thompson," I heard myself say. "I understand arrangements have been made." "Yes, the Thompson family." The funeral director's voice warmed with professional sympathy. "Your son Michael was very specific about the arrangements. Very thorough, very thorough. Of course he was. No viewing, no autopsy, immediate cremation. He said those were your exact wishes. He was quite emotional about respecting your desire for privacy and simplicity. No autopsy, no chance for anyone to examine my body, no evidence of foul play. Michael had researched exactly how to get away with murder. The memorial service is scheduled for next week," the funeral director continued. "Just immediate family, as requested. Your son mentioned you preferred small, private gatherings. He seemed very devoted to honoring your wishes. Devoted. The word tasted like poison." I hung up without saying goodbye and stared at my reflection in the car window. According to the official record, I was already dead, already cremated, already reduced to ash and memory and a $400,000 insurance payout. In Michael's version of reality, I no longer existed. But I was sitting in a bank parking lot, breathing and thinking and finally understanding the scope of what my family had planned. They hadn't just wanted my money. They'd wanted me gone. Completely. Permanently. Legally. I thought about the warm phone charger I'd found in my house. Michael had been there recently, using my electricity while he planned my death, eating my food while he forged my signature, charging his phone while he called funeral homes to arrange my cremation. The violation felt complete now. They'd stolen my money, my identity, my medical records, my future. And when that wasn't enough, they'd stolen my life itself. My hands weren't shaking anymore. The cold thing in my chest had spread outward, freezing my tears before they could fall. I felt something I hadn't felt since James died. Clarity. Michael thought he was so smart. Jennifer thought she was so clever. They'd built their house of lies so carefully, documented everything so thoroughly, planned every detail so precisely. but they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd left me alive to discover it. I started my car and drove home, my mind already working. If Michael was willing to fake my death for money, if he'd go to these lengths to steal my life, what would he do when he discovered I knew the truth? He'd have to accelerate his timeline. The preliminary death certificate was already filed. The insurance claim was already processing. The funeral arrangements were already made. How long did I have before Michael decided the pending on my death certificate needed to become confirmed? The phone rang 2 days after I'd discovered my own death certificate. Michael's voice on the other end sounded bright, cheerful, completely normal, as if he hadn't spent the last 6 months planning to murder me for money. "Mom, how are you feeling? We've been so worried." I let my voice waver, just slightly. Let confusion creep into my words. "Oh, Michael, honey, I've been so lonely, so confused about things." The relief that flooded through the phone line was audible. "Mom, that's exactly what we've been trying to tell you. You need family around you." He insisted I come to Denver for Christmas. "Let us take care of everything," he said. "We'll get this family back together where it belongs." I bought my plane ticket under my maiden name, Nancy Collins, just in case they were monitoring my credit cards the way they'd monitored everything else. Then I went shopping for Christmas presents, special Christmas presents. I spent 3 days at the copy shop reproducing every document I'd discovered, bank statements showing the stolen money, power of attorney papers with my forged signature, fake medical reports from doctors I'd never met, my own death certificate, filed while I was unconscious on an operating table. Each set of documents went into a festive gift box wrapped in cheerful red paper with golden bows. 23 boxes in total, one for each person Michael and Jennifer had invited to witness what they thought would be my final surrender. The flight to Denver felt like flying toward my own execution, but this time I was bringing the firing squad. Michael met me at the airport with the biggest smile I'd seen from him in years. He actually seemed happy to see me. Of course he was. He thought I was giving up, giving in, handing over my life without a fight. "Mom, you look tired," he said, wrapping me in a hug that felt like a spider's embrace. "We're going to take such good care of you." Jennifer met us at their front door wearing a red sweater and an expression of practiced concern. "Mom Thompson, we're so glad you're here. This is going to be the best Christmas ever." She'd invited quite a crowd. Rebecca, her sister, sat in the living room with her husband and 2 children. Jennifer's parents, Frank and Carol Martinez, had driven up from Colorado Springs. 2 neighbor couples I'd met at Tyler's graduation. Several of Jennifer's co-workers from the insurance office where she worked part-time. Perfect witnesses for what I'd planned. Tyler appeared from the kitchen, taller than I remembered, his face carefully neutral. 17 now, almost a man. He hugged me carefully, like I might break. "Hey, Grandma, how are you feeling?" "Much better now that I'm with family," I said, squeezing his hand perhaps a little too tightly. I played my part perfectly during dinner, the confused but grateful grandmother, so thankful her family was willing to help with her problems. I let Jennifer cut my meat. I asked Michael to repeat things twice. I pretended to be confused about which fork to use for salad. They ate it up like candy. "See how much better Mom is when she's with family," Michael announced to the table. "She just needs people who understand her condition." Jennifer nodded sympathetically. It's so hard when elderly people start to decline. They don't always understand what's best for them anymore. Rebecca, the lying social worker, chimed in with professional authority. "It's actually very common. Cognitive decline can make people paranoid about the very people trying to help them." I nodded along, playing the part they'd written for me. The confused old woman who needed management, the burden they were so generously shouldering. After dinner, we gathered in the living room for gift exchange. The Christmas tree sparkled with white lights, everything picture perfect for their holiday performance. "I have something special for everyone," I announced, retrieving my stack of festively wrapped boxes from beside the tree. Something to show how much I appreciate everything you've all done for me." I handed out the boxes with hands that trembled, not entirely from acting. My heart hammered against my ribs as I watched each person receive their package. "I thought everyone should see what Michael and Jennifer have been working on together," I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. "They've been so concerned about my health and my finances, so devoted to helping their poor, confused mother." Jennifer's smile faltered slightly. "Mom Thompson, you didn't need to—" "Oh, but I did," I interrupted. "Open them. Please. I want everyone to see." The sound of tearing wrapping paper filled the room like gunshots. Red and gold foil scattered across the hardwood floors as 23 people opened 23 identical boxes. Silence fell like a guillotine blade. Rebecca's face drained of all color as she stared at her own falsified social work evaluation. Her husband leaned over to read the document, his expression shifting from confusion to horror. Frank and Carol Martinez held copies of forged checks bearing their daughter's handwriting. Jennifer's careful forgeries of my signature, endorsing thousands of dollars to fake companies. The neighbor couples looked between the bank statements and Michael's panicked face, not understanding the details but recognizing the tension crackling through the room like electricity before a storm. Tyler, home from his first semester of college, opened his box with careful hands. Inside, he found printed copies of text messages between his parents, messages discussing my timeline and their asset liquidation strategy, messages about getting rid of me before I became more of a problem. I watched his face transform in real time, innocence dying, understanding blooming like a poisonous flower. He read his parents' casual discussions about my death, their calculations about insurance money, their timeline for making me disappear. "Tyler, honey," Jennifer started. "Don't." His voice came out flat, dead. "Just don't." Michael stood up so fast his chair toppled backward. "This is insane!" "Mom, you're having another episode. These people don't understand your condition." But Tyler was still reading. Page after page of evidence that his parents had planned to murder his grandmother for money. When Michael lunged toward me, trying to grab the papers from my hands, I was ready. My voice cut through the chaos like a blade sharpened on 43 years of disappointment. "Don't touch me, son. Not after you tried to kill me." Tyler stood up from the couch, documents scattered around him like evidence at a crime scene. "Kill you? Dad, what is she talking about?" My voice grew stronger with each revelation. "Your father filed a death certificate for me while I was having surgery. He's been stealing my money for months. He planned my funeral while I was unconscious on an operating table." I pulled out the death certificate, my name typed neatly in the deceased box, the insurance claims with my death listed as pending. The funeral arrangement specifying immediate cremation with no autopsy. Michael's desperation exploded into rage. "You're crazy. You're a sick old woman who doesn't know what's real anymore. These people don't know you like we do." But the evidence spoke louder than his shouting. Tyler was reading every page, his face changing with each new horror. Jennifer's parents stared at their daughter's handwriting on fraudulent documents. Rebecca examined her own falsified professional report with shaking hands. A room full of witnesses was seeing the truth with their own eyes. No amount of shouting from Michael could change what was written in black and white. When Michael grabbed for my purse, trying to destroy the evidence, Tyler stepped between us. My 17-year-old grandson, 6 feet tall and solid as his grandfather had been, placed himself between his father and me. "Dad, stop. Just stop." The words came out quiet but final. "Absolute. Grandma's telling the truth, isn't she?" Michael looked around the room, seeing his carefully constructed life crumbling in real time. Jennifer sat frozen, her face white as Christmas snow. Rebecca had started crying, understanding that her professional license was finished. Frank and Carol Martinez stared at their daughter like they were seeing a stranger. "Tyler, you don't understand," Michael said, his voice breaking. "She's sick." "She's confused. We were trying to help her, but Tyler held up a printed text message. Michael's own words, cold and clear. Once Mom Thompson is committed or dead, we'll have everything we need. She won't be a problem much longer. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood up slowly, gathering my dignity around me like armor. I think it's time for me to go. No one tried to stop me. Michael stood frozen by his overturned chair. Jennifer wept silently into her hands. Rebecca's husband was already pulling out his phone, probably calling a lawyer. I walked toward the front door with my head held high, my evidence protected, my truth finally spoken. The cold Denver air hit my face like a blessing. Behind me, I heard footsteps on the porch. Tyler's voice, uncertain but determined. "Grandma, wait." I turned to see my grandson standing in the doorway, holding one of the evidence folders against his chest. The porch light cast half his face in shadow, making him look older than his 17 years. But I couldn't tell if he was coming to support me or to try to save his parents from the wreckage of their own making. My phone rang at 11:30 that night. Tyler's voice came through shaky and urgent. "Grandma, can you meet me? I have something you need to see." I was already reaching for my coat. "Where?" "There's a gas station on Colfax, 3 miles from the house. I'll text you the address. Don't let anyone follow you." The drive through Denver's empty streets felt like navigating a minefield. Every set of headlights in my rearview mirror might be Michael. Every shadow might be Jennifer. But Tyler was waiting under the fluorescent lights, hunched over the steering wheel of his beat-up Honda, looking older than his 17 years. He led me to a 24-hour diner called Mel's, the kind of place that smelled like coffee and regret. We slid into a corner booth while the night shift worked around us. Tyler carried a shoebox that looked like it had been hidden for months. "I knew something was wrong when Dad started talking about your will all the time," he whispered, glancing toward the door like he expected his parents to burst through it. Every conversation somehow came back to your money, your house, your health. He opened the shoebox with careful hands. Inside were printed emails, bank statements photographed with his phone, and recording devices I hadn't known existed. I've been collecting evidence since last summer. The documents spilled across the sticky diner table like pieces of a horrifying puzzle. Tyler had printed emails between Michael and Jennifer discussing my asset timeline. Bank statements he'd photographed when his parents left papers lying around. Screenshots of text messages planning my financial destruction. But the recordings were the most damning. Tyler pulled out his iPhone and pressed play. Michael's voice filled the space between us, clear and cold. "The surgery gives us the perfect window. Natural complications. Family too grief-stricken to ask questions." Jennifer's voice in the background. "What about Tyler? He's close to her." Michael's response made my blood freeze. "He'll get over it. Kids are resilient, and he'll thank us when he sees his inheritance." I stared at my grandson across the table. "How long have you been recording them?" "Since they started acting weird around you." "Since Dad kept asking about your medications and Mom started going through your purse when she thought no one was looking." Tyler had been living in a house of murderers for months, collecting evidence while pretending to be the oblivious teenager they thought he was, playing video games while his parents planned my death in the next room. "After Christmas dinner tonight, all hell broke loose," Tyler continued. "Mom cried for 3 hours, claiming you were manipulating me with lies. Dad threatened to cut off my college fund, take my car, disconnect my phone. His hands shook as he sorted through more documents. Uncle Frank called, Aunt Carol called, even some of Mom's friends from work, all saying I was hurting my parents with horrible accusations and that I needed to think about my family. But Tyler had heard too much, seen too much, recorded too much. Grandma, they never loved you. They only talked about you like a bank account with an expiration date. The words hit me like physical blows, but I needed to hear them. I needed to understand the scope of what my family had planned. Tyler pulled out another folder, this one thick with timeline charts and printed emails. "It's worse than just the money, Grandma. They've been destroying your life for 5 years, since right after Grandpa died. He spread the timeline across the table like a coroner's report. Emails Jennifer had sent to my bridge club, expressing concern about my memory issues. Phone logs showing Michael had called neighbor Dorothy multiple times, warning her I was becoming forgetful and difficult. They told your church you were getting confused during services, Tyler said. They called Dr. Martinez and told him you were having trouble managing your medications. The isolation hadn't been natural grief. It had been engineered. They'd painted me as an unreliable old woman, then positioned themselves as my only support system. But the medical manipulation was the cruelest revelation. Tyler showed me printed emails between Jennifer and Dr. Martinez, private communications where Jennifer expressed concerns about my memory and judgment. She'd been attending my doctor appointments for 2 years, sitting beside me and contradicting my descriptions of symptoms. She convinced Dr. Martinez to prescribe sedatives for your anxiety after Grandpa's death, Tyler explained. Lorazepam, Ativan, anti-anxiety medications that made you genuinely confused. My hands shook as I read Jennifer's careful documentation, dosages, timing, coordination with Michael about when to escalate their concerns to my doctor. They drugged me into the very confusion they claimed to be treating. Every time you felt foggy or forgetful, it was because of the medications they convinced your doctor to give you, Tyler said. Then they used that confusion as evidence you needed family oversight. I thought about the months after James died when everything had felt so difficult. Simple tasks that became overwhelming. Conversations I couldn't quite follow. Appointments I'd forgotten. I'd blamed grief, blamed age, blamed everything except the people who were supposed to be helping me heal. They'd medically gaslit me for years. Tyler's voice dropped to a whisper as he reached for his final folder. Grandma, there's something else. Something about Grandpa James. The words made my stomach clench. What about him? I think they killed him too. The diner fell away. The coffee smells and fluorescent lights and late-night conversations at other tables. Everything disappeared except Tyler's voice and the folder in his hands. I found Dad's storage unit key in his desk drawer. Made a copy last month when I started suspecting things. I've been going there when they think I'm at school. He'd found James's complete medical records hidden beneath Christmas decorations. Documents I'd never seen, appointments I'd never known about, a secret medical timeline that revealed the truth about my husband's death. Dad was taking Grandpa to doctors you didn't know about. He told them you were too emotional to handle medical discussions after Grandpa's heart attack. The medications prescribed during those secret visits conflicted with James's existing prescriptions. Blood thinners from Dr. Martinez, additional blood pressure medication from Dr. Stevens, heart medication from Dr. Rodriguez, all doctors I'd never heard of. I took pictures of everything, Tyler said, showing me his phone. Then I did research. These medication combinations should never be prescribed together. We left the diner at 2 a.m. and drove to a 24-hour pharmacy where Tyler had befriended a night pharmacist. Linda Scott looked like she hadn't slept in years, but her eyes went sharp when Tyler showed her the medication list. These drugs together? She shook her head. This combination was designed to cause heart failure. Any pharmacist would have flagged this as dangerous, but Michael had used different pharmacies, spread the prescriptions across town, paid cash to avoid insurance records that might reveal the pattern. Your husband was systematically poisoned, Linda said quietly. The next morning, I called the lawyer Patricia Rodriguez had recommended. Within hours, we had a court order to obtain James's autopsy report, the document I'd never seen because Michael had handled all the arrangements to spare me the trauma. James had died of acute cardiac failure due to drug interaction, but the coroner had noted the unusual medication combination and recommended a police investigation, an investigation that never happened. Michael had told authorities I was too grief-stricken to discuss medical details. He'd provided falsified records showing James was confused about his medications, painting the death as an elderly man's mistake rather than murder. The coroner's report included a note that had never been followed up. Family member unusually well prepared with documentation, showed limited emotional response to death. Recommend family interview, but the interview never happened because Michael had told police I was sedated for grief and unable to speak with investigators. I held my husband's autopsy report in my trembling hands, finally understanding his rapid decline, his increasing confusion in those final months, the way he'd seemed to fade away a little more each day. James hadn't died of old age or heart disease. He'd been murdered by his own son, slowly, methodically, using the medical system as a weapon. Tyler watched me read through the evidence, his young face etched with sorrow and rage. Dad practiced on Grandpa, didn't he? Figured out how to kill someone without getting caught. Then he started the same process with you. The pieces fell into place like dominoes in reverse. Michael taking James to secret doctor appointments, the conflicting medications, the rapid cognitive decline, the convenient death just when James might have become too much trouble to manage. Then the 5-year campaign against me, the isolation, the medical manipulation, the financial theft, building up to my own natural death from surgical complications and underlying dementia. Michael had been perfecting his technique. I looked across the table at my grandson, this brave young man who'd risked everything to expose his parents' crimes. Tyler had given me the truth about James's murder, given me proof of the conspiracy, given me everything I needed to destroy Michael and Jennifer completely. But as I stared at the evidence spread across our table, one question burned in my mind. If Michael had been willing to murder his own father for practice, what would he do to the grandson who'd betrayed him? 2 days after Tyler showed me James's autopsy report, I called Michael. My voice trembled as I dialed, but not from fear anymore, from anticipation. "Michael, honey," I said when he answered, letting my words waver like autumn leaves. I think I've been making terrible mistakes." The relief that flooded through the phone line was almost audible. "Mom, I'm so glad you called. We've been worried sick about you. Maybe I am getting confused, like you said. Maybe I do need help managing things. Mom, that's exactly what we've been trying to tell you. We're family. We love you. We just want what's best." I let silence stretch between us, filling it with the weight of a broken old woman finally surrendering. "Could you and Jennifer come to Phoenix this weekend? I want to fix things before it's too late. I want to sign whatever papers you think are best." Michael's eagerness was disgusting. "Of course, Mom. We'll fly out tomorrow. We'll take care of everything." While Michael made travel arrangements, I was making preparations of my own. I hired private investigator Marcus Webb, recommended by Patricia Rodriguez. Marcus looked like someone's grandfather, with silver hair and kind eyes that missed nothing. "Mrs. Thompson, I've been investigating elder abuse for 20 years. What your family did to you and your husband. This is one of the worst cases I've seen." Marcus installed recording equipment throughout my house. Tiny microphones hidden in lamps, cameras disguised as picture frames, digital recorders tucked inside tissue boxes. Every word Michael and Jennifer spoke would be captured in crystal clear detail. I withdrew cash from 3 different banks, documenting my mental clarity with video recordings at each location. Hired Patricia Rodriguez on full retainer. Created detailed timelines of my daily activities to prove my competence. When Michael and Jennifer arrived on Friday evening, I would be ready for war. They landed at Phoenix Sky Harbor with fresh legal documents and predatory smiles. Michael carried a briefcase full of power of attorney papers. Jennifer brought a folder of financial transfer forms. They practically salivated over my apparent mental collapse. "Mom, you look tired," Jennifer said, embracing me with arms that felt like spider legs. "We're going to take such good care of you." I played my role perfectly. The confused, grateful mother finally ready to let her family help. I served them dinner on my best china, poured wine from bottles they'd stolen from my anniversary collection months ago. The irony was delicious. During dinner, they relaxed completely, Guard down, masks off. The recording equipment captured every word as they discussed their frustration with my stubborn refusal to die. "Once we get the house sold and her moved into that memory care facility," Jennifer said clearly into my hidden microphones, "we'll have complete control. No more interference from meddling neighbors or nosy doctors." Michael nodded, cutting his steak with the silver knife I'd received as a wedding gift. "The Phoenix facility I found specializes in advanced dementia cases, very understanding about families who need to make difficult decisions. They were planning to warehouse me until I died naturally or could be helped along, just like they'd done to James." "What about Tyler?" Jennifer asked. "He seemed upset after Christmas." "Tyler will understand when he's older," Michael said. "Kids bounce back. And he'll thank us when he inherits everything." I smiled and nodded along like a compliant old woman while rage burned cold in my chest. They thought they'd won. They thought I was broken. They had no idea what was coming. While Michael and Jennifer celebrated their apparent victory over dinner, I was already destroying their professional network piece by piece. That morning, I'd filed complaints with the Arizona State Board of Medical Examiners about Dr. Peterson's fraudulent evaluations, Tyler's recordings and bank records showing payments for fake diagnoses went straight to the investigation committee. I submitted evidence of Robert Caldwell's elder abuse conspiracy to the State Bar Association, financial records showing his payments from families who'd gained control of elderly relatives' assets, medical reports he'd helped falsify, death certificates he'd helped expedite. But attacking Rebecca's social work license was the most satisfying. I'd spent weeks contacting other elderly clients she'd evaluated, finding 3 families with identical stories, the same pattern of falsified reports, the same recommendations for family oversight, the same elderly victims stripped of their independence based on Rebecca's lies. Nancy's revenge was methodical and devastating. I'd learned their tactics by being their victim. Now I turned those same weapons against their creators. Every fake medical report became evidence of professional fraud. Every forged document became proof of criminal conspiracy. Every lie they'd told about my mental state became ammunition for their destruction. I contacted the other victim families, helping them understand they'd been targeted by an organized criminal enterprise. 3 families came forward with stories identical to mine. The same doctors, the same lawyer, the same social worker, the same pattern of financial theft disguised as family concern. I organized phone conferences between the families, shared evidence, coordinated legal strategies. The network that had seemed so powerful and untouchable was crumbling as victims found their voices. I'd given them something they'd lost, hope, and the knowledge that they weren't alone. But my final weapon was the most devastating of all: public humiliation. I contacted Channel 12 News with my story. The investigative reporter, Amanda Santos, listened to Tyler's recordings with growing horror. When I showed her the death certificate with my name in the deceased box, her face went white. "Mrs. Thompson, this is one of the most shocking cases of elder abuse I've ever encountered. Would you be willing to go on camera?" Within a week, the death certificate fraud case was front-page news across Arizona and Colorado. I gave interviews with my evidence folders spread across news desks, speaking in clear, sharp sentences that destroyed Michael and Jennifer's narrative of my confusion. Channel 12 ran a special investigation called "The Family That Tried to Murder Grandma for Money." My recorded conversations with Michael and Jennifer played on evening news, their voices discussing my death timeline and asset liquidation, planning my funeral while I was still breathing. The contrast was stark and deliberate. I appeared calm, articulate, devastatingly credible. They sounded like calculating predators. The public response was overwhelming. Letters poured in from elderly viewers sharing similar experiences. The story went viral on social media. Michael and Jennifer's photos appeared in articles shared thousands of times. Their employers saw the evidence. Michael was fired from his engineering job at Lockheed Martin. Jennifer lost her part-time position at the children's charity where she'd volunteered. Their country club revoked their membership. Tyler's former friends' parents forbade contact. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid them. They became social pariahs in their own community, their reputations destroyed by the truth I'd finally been able to tell. I watched their world collapse on the evening news from my living room, Tyler beside me on the couch where James used to read his newspaper. The same couch where Michael and Jennifer had sat planning my death just days earlier. "Grandma," Tyler said quietly, "are you sure you want to keep going?" "They're already destroyed." I looked at my grandson, this brave young man who'd risked everything to expose his parents' crimes. "Tyler, honey, destroying their reputations was just the beginning. My public victory was complete, but the legal reckoning was just beginning.